You follow the gram scale with the precision of a laboratory technician. 500 grams of organic rye flour. 350 grams of hydration. Temperature controlled at exactly 24 degrees Celsius. You wait. You watch. You expect life. But the glass jar remains a tomb. The mixture inside does not bubble. The mixture turns a sickly gray. A layer of dark, alcoholic liquid separates on top, signaling not fermentation, but starvation and death. The modern baker looks at this failure and blames the flour. The modern baker blames the ambient temperature. The modern baker blames a lack of skill. This is a lie. The failure did not happen in the bowl. The failure happened before the tap was even turned on. 800 years ago, a peasant in rural France did not own a scale. The peasant did not understand the existence of single-celled organisms. The peasant certainly did not have a sanitized, temperature-controlled proofing box. Yet, the peasant mixed rough-hewn grain with water drawn from a limestone well, and within 12 hours, the wooden trough was overflowing with violent, bubbling life. The bread rose with a ferocity that modern commercial yeast struggles to replicate. The crumb was open, translucent, and easily digested. Here is the uncomfortable paradox. The modern world has achieved water purity standards that are a miracle of public health. Yet this same purity is an ecological disaster for the microcosm of fermentation. We have engineered water that is safe for humans to drink, but lethal for the microscopic allies humans have relied upon for millennia. We have traded vitality for sterility. The secret lies in the invisible chemistry of the water source. The modern industrial complex treats water not as a living medium, but as a sterile delivery system. To achieve this, municipal water treatment plants inject chemical compounds designed specifically to destroy biological activity. These compounds do not distinguish between the cholera bacteria that kills you and the wild yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that feeds you. When the tap is turned on, the fluid that flows out is not just water, it is a biocide. This investigation will expose a critical oversight in modern baking and survival skills. While the internet obsesses over hydration percentages and flour types, the fundamental solvent, the water itself, is being ignored. We have been sold a convenient lie that clean water is good water, but in the world of wild fermentation, clean often means dead. The medieval baker succeeded not because of superior skill, but because the medieval water source was chemically complex, mineral-heavy, and biologically compatible. The modern baker fails because the modern water source is a chemical weapon against single-celled life. This is not about nostalgia. This is about biochemistry. This is about the difference between feeding a culture and poisoning it. If you have ever stared at a sourdough starter that refuses to rise, or eaten bread that leaves you bloated and heavy, the culprit is likely flowing out of the kitchen faucet right now. The industry knows this. Commercial bakeries invest millions in filtration and remineralization systems to strip the municipal poison and rebuild the water from scratch. But the home baker is left in the dark, pouring chemical sterilizers directly into a bowl of wild yeast and wondering why the culture dies. We are about to dismantle the chemistry of tap water. We will examine the molecular difference between the water in a medieval limestone aquifer and the water in a modern CPVC pipe. We will uncover why the purity of the modern age is actually a form of nutritional starvation. The knowledge of water chemistry was once intuitive, tasted on the tongue, and felt in the gut. Today, that knowledge has been bleached away, leaving us with bread that looks like food but digests like brick. To understand why the starter dies, we must first analyze the weapon used to kill it. For decades, the standard for water sanitation was chlorine. Chlorine is a volatile gas dissolved in water. It is effective at killing bacteria, but it has a weakness. It is unstable. If a pitcher of chlorinated water is left on the counter for 24 hours, the chlorine off-gases into the atmosphere. The water becomes safe for fermentation. This was the grandmother's trick that worked for generations. But the water industry realized that chlorine was inefficient. It evaporated too quickly, leaving the water in the far ends of the distribution pipes vulnerable to recontamination. To solve this efficiency problem, modern water treatment plants switched to chloramine. Chloramine is a chemical compound formed by binding chlorine with ammonia. This bond is incredibly stable. Unlike simple chlorine, chloramine does not evaporate. Chloramine does not boil off. Chloramine stays in the water effectively forever. When this water is mixed with flour, the chloramine remains active. It acts as a persistent oxidative agent, attacking the cell walls of the wild yeast and the beneficial lactic acid bacteria. The baker is trying to cultivate a complex ecosystem of Lactobacillus sanfrancisensis and Candida malari, while simultaneously pouring a chemical designed to rupture their cellular membranes into the mix. It is chemical warfare in a mixing bowl. The modern failure goes deeper than just toxicity. It extends to a fundamental misunderstanding of what water actually is. We are taught that water is H2O. In a laboratory, this is true. In nature, this is false. Pure H2O is a hungry, aggressive solvent. It wants to dissolve things. It strips minerals from whatever it touches. Consider the modern solution of reverse osmosis RO filtration. Many health-conscious individuals, fearing the chemicals in tap water, switch to RO systems. These systems strip everything out of the water. They remove the chlorine, yes, but they also remove the calcium, the magnesium, the bicarbonates, and the trace sulfates. The result is soft water. When soft water is used in baking, a disastrous physical reaction occurs. The gluten structure, the protein network that traps gas and allows the bread to rise, relies on ions to form strong bonds. Without minerals like calcium, to act as a bridge between protein strands, the gluten remains weak and sticky. The dough feels slack. It tears when stretched. The baker adds more flour, thinking the hydration is too high. But the problem is chemical. The water is too empty. It cannot support the architecture of the loaf. Contrast this with the medieval reality. The water used by a 13th century baker was never pure H2O. It was hard water. It was rain that had filtered through feet of soil and bedrock, dissolving limestone and chalk along the way. This water was saturated with calcium carbonate and magnesium sulfate. This mineral load was not an impurity. It was a nutrient delivery system. Yeast cells require minerals to function. Magnesium is a critical cofactor for the enzymes that yeast uses to metabolize sugar. Without magnesium, the metabolic engine of the yeast cell stalls. The fermentation becomes sluggish. The yeast struggles to reproduce. The baker waits for the dough to double in size, but the yeast is essentially starving in a room full of food because it lacks the mineral keys to unlock the energy. Furthermore, the soft modern water creates an environment that is pH unstable. Fermentation produces organic acids, lactic acid, and acetic acid. In soft water, there is no buffer capacity. The acidity of the dough spikes rapidly, causing the pH to crash. This sudden acid shock paralyzes the yeast before the gluten has had time to develop. The result is a loaf that is dense, gummy, and incredibly sour, the hallmark of bad homemade sourdough. The medieval water, rich in alkaline minerals from the earth, acted as a natural buffer. The calcium carbonate neutralized the excess acid, keeping the pH in the sweet spot where yeast activity is maximized and proteolytic enzymes function correctly. The dough could ferment for 12, 18, even 24 hours without the gluten disintegrating. This long, slow fermentation broke down the anti-nutrients in the grain, pre-digested the gluten, and unlocked the bioavailability of vitamins. The modern obsession with cleanliness has created a blind spot. We view minerals as scale that clogs our coffee machines and ruins our plumbing. We install softeners to remove them. We install filters to strip them. And then we wonder why our bread lacks the structural integrity and the complex flavor of the past. We are trying to build a cathedral using bricks, but no mortar. The minerals are the mortar. Without them, the biology of the bread collapses. The scientific evidence for this mineral dependency is not merely anecdotal, it is rigorous and quantifiable. Studies conducted on fermentation kinetics clearly show the inhibitory effect of halogenated compounds like chloramine on microbial growth rates. Research confirms that even low concentrations of residual sanitizers can retard the lag phase of yeast growth, meaning the culture takes significantly longer to wake up and begin feeding. In a competitive environment like a sourdough starter, where wild yeast must outcompete bad bacteria for dominance, this delay can be fatal. The bad bacteria, often more resilient to chemical shocks, take over, leading to the putrid smells and mold, often seen in failed starters. Look to the archaeological record for the definitive proof. The great baking centers of the ancient and medieval world were never located randomly. They were tethered to specific hydrogeological features. The bakeries of Pompeii, preserved in ash, were fed by the aqueducts carrying water from the Apennine Mountains, water so rich in calcium that thick deposits of travertine scales still line the ancient pipes today. This was not just water, it was liquid limestone. In medieval Europe, the monasteries were the custodians of brewing and baking knowledge. These monasteries were almost exclusively built near holy wells, or deep aquifers. The monks recorded that water from certain springs produced superior ale and bread compared to surface water from the river. They did not know about calcium ions bonding with glutenin and gliadin proteins, but they observed the results. They observed that the hard water produced a vigorous fermentation and a strong, elastic dough. Science has now explained what the monks practiced. The enzyme alpha amylase, which is present in the flour and responsible for breaking down complex starches into simple sugars for the yeast to eat, is a metalloenzyme. It literally requires calcium atoms to maintain its structural stability and function. If the water is stripped of calcium, like modern RO water or rainwater, the amylase activity is significantly reduced. The starch remains locked. The yeast has no sugar to eat. The fermentation stalls. So, how does the modern survivalist reclaim this lost advantage? The solution is not to abandon modern hygiene, but to re-engineer the water chemistry to mimic the medieval aquifer. First, the chloramine must be neutralized. A standard carbon filter pitcher is often insufficient because the flow rate is too fast to allow for the contact time needed to break the ammonia bond. The most effective biological hack is ascorbic acid vitamin C. Adding a tiny pinch of pure vitamin C powder to the tap water neutralizes chloramine almost instantly. This is a chemical fact, used by dialysis centers, and it is the first line of defense for the baker. Second, the water must be hardened. If using RO water or distilled water, the mineral profile must be rebuilt. This does not require a laboratory. It requires unrefined sea salt and perhaps a piece of limestone. A small pinch of Celtic gray salt or Himalayan pink salt adds not just sodium, but magnesium, calcium, and potassium back into the solution. For those seeking the ultimate authentic replication, the stone method can be employed. Boiling water with a sterilized chunk of limestone or marble, then letting it cool, will infuse the water with calcium carbonate, creating the perfect alkaline buffer for long fermentation. The math of this application is strikingly favorable. A bag of high-quality organic flour costs significant money. A jar of vitamin C powder and a bag of sea salt cost pennies per loaf. By ignoring the water chemistry, the baker wastes the expensive flour. By correcting the water, the investment in the grain is realized. The efficiency of the fermentation doubles. The bread rises higher. The texture lightens. The preservation of the loaf extends by days because a healthy, acidic fermentation is the ultimate natural preservative. We are seeing a return to the terroir of water. Just as the minerals in the soil define the taste of the wine, the minerals in the water define the structure of the bread. The medieval peasant had no choice but to use the local hard water, and thus accidentally achieved perfection. The modern human has too many choices, and usually chooses wrong. This investigation into a cup of water reveals a profound truth about the trajectory of human progress. We have confused pure with good. In our quest to sterilize our environment, to remove every potential pathogen, every speck of dirt, and every dissolved solid, we have created a world that is hostile to life itself. The medieval baker was a master of applied physics and biology, not because of a degree on the wall, but because of a connection to the raw materials. They understood that they were not the creators of the bread. They were merely the facilitators of a biological process. They respected the invisible workforce of the yeast and the bacteria. They fed them the water that the earth provided, rich, heavy, and alive. We, the modern consumers, treat ingredients as dead components to be assembled. We pour sterile chemicals into sterile bowls and expect life to spring forth. When it fails, we buy more gadgets. We buy bread machines. We buy commercial yeast boosters. We look for the solution in technology when the problem is that we have removed nature from the equation. To bake real bread, to truly survive and thrive, one must stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a craftsman. A craftsman looks at a glass of clear water and asks, "What is in this? What has been taken out?" A craftsman understands that efficiency is not about speed. It is about the integrity of the process. Reclaiming the knowledge of water chemistry is a small step. It is just a pinch of salt, a filter, a moment of consideration before the tap is turned. But it represents a massive shift in mindset. It is a refusal to accept the industrial standard of dead and safe. It is a choice to cultivate living and resilient. The wild yeast is waiting in the air, on the grain, and on your skin. It wants to live. It wants to feed you. It simply needs water that hasn't been designed to kill it. Give it the water of the earth, the water of the ancestors, and it will give you the sustenance that built civilizations.